I'm Michael Goldberg. I'm the executive director of our Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship and also a professor at the Weatherhead School of Management, sitting in my office right now. It's great to have Zach Fleitman join us today. Zach is one of in our inaugural class of entrepreneurs in residence at the Veale Institute. He's a new addition to Northeast Ohio, having, I guess the term is trailing spouse, right? Is that the proper way to say it? His wife is a physician at University Hospitals, and we're thrilled to get Zach and wife, and now new baby is coming here to Northeast Ohio, where his wife grew up. Zach's currently the CFO of Vox Mobile, but has done a lot of interesting things in his career. I know we have him back on the speaker schedule soon to talk about some of his startup journey within healthcare. And I know today's topic is part of our skills workshop series around pitching is something that a lot of folks are interested in, whether you're entrepreneurs or non-entrepreneurs. It's always critical to pitch. So Zach, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. And we are really looking forward to having you share with us.
No, absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I'm a trailing spouse. I've lived the last 11 years before this in New York. So I'm really enjoying, having more than 500 square feet. I think my wife feels similarly, and I know my dog does. Really been enjoying the Cleveland area. Excited to get to experience it in full once we're not in the current COVID situation. But excited to talk about pitching. Eduardo, we were talking quickly before we got up and running here, but I think a lot of people feel the same way about pitching, which is that it can be an intimidating thing to do. So I'll just start, give a kind of quick blurb on my background in terms of how I got here, because it is a probably non-traditional path on the entrepreneurial side. I actually started in investment banking, overlapped a bit with Todd at Morgan Stanley. Back when investment banking was still a destination where people, coming out of college would really target and strive to be at. I think nowadays people look more towards the tech companies, but pre the 2009 collapse, finance was a common thread. And I actually started at Lehman Brothers, which no longer exists, moved to Morgan Stanley, did a couple years in investment banking, and then got into startups. So I was the fifth member of two different startups, both of which I joined before they had a product in market, so long before revenue. Which gave me the opportunity to see, a growing business growing from the ground up. I did stops kind of everywhere within the organizations, heavy focus on operations, did a lot of sales, did a lot of finance, and learned a lot from it. And I'll focus specifically today on the pitching side of the world, which I've done for both my last two companies pretty heavily. And then as Michael mentioned, I'm coming back here in a week to talk a little bit more about the career path, both for me and kind of how I would have changed or what I would recommend doing the same. So let me pull up a deck here. Pitching. And I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm going to subject you all to my puns. That's just the way I am, but I have the screen, so I guess we're going to have to deal with it. If you want to lead, if you want to start an organization, if you want to be in a position of leadership within an organization, pitching is really one of, I think, the more underrated and more valuable skills that you go to, frankly, all the time, and that you're going to go back to. So it's one you want to get comfortable with pretty early on in your journey, or find a way to put yourself in the position to practice so that you can get comfortable with it. So the question that I'm going to pose here is when should you pitch? When should anyone kind of pull out the pitch card? And we have some people on the call here, and obviously you're all interested in learning how to do this, but I'm curious as to why you're interested. So, from the people on the call, and see if we can get some participation here. When would you guys envision pulling out your company pitch? When would you want to do this?
Let's go. We can't have Zach or you're going to make the people at the Veale Institute do some work here. And I know Chelan is on at work. Maybe I'll start, Zach, just to kind of get things rolling and folks can sort of join in. I mean, I think it's a really interesting question because perhaps the answer is you're always pitching, right? Even when you're not pitching. So, is there, and maybe it's the informal pitch versus sort of the formal pitch. But I guess in my own experiences, you're always pitching, and yeah, perhaps depending on what your goals are.
I think that's exactly right. I think a lot of people come in and they think of pitching as, you're sitting in front of, a South by Southwest audience, or you're sitting at a round table in front of VCs or in front of a big customer. And that's kind of everyone's core. Okay, this is when I need to pitch, and this is why I need to know how to pitch. And those are really the first two, and definitely two of the most important items. But as Michael said, there are so many different times when a pitch comes in handy. So you don't just have to be a founder. You don't just have to be in sales to need your pitch. If you're looking to strike partnerships with other companies, whether it be on the business development side, whether it be on the technology side, it's really important to have a good pitch. If you are in a position of leadership, you're going to have to recruit and hire. And it's really important to be able to get those high caliber employees and potential employees to join your team. And a pitch is a core part of that. Similarly, let's say you have an existing team, and startups in all companies, but startups specifically, are a real roller coaster of emotions. And sometimes team morale is going to be low, and you as a leader need to be able to pump your team up. Similarly, and this is when we get into kind of the really underutilized areas for pitching, when you're working with vendors, the vendors on the other side of you are human. Whether you're talking to Amazon, whether you're talking to a bank, whether you're talking to the people that do your data security or even your physical services, you'd be surprised at how big of a variety there can be in the terms of their contracts with you, their pricing. They have large leeway to advocate for better deals for you. And if you get them excited about where your company is and where your company is going, they want to be on board with that. And everyone wants to join in a mission. Everyone wants to be involved in something that's growing and something that's succeeding. And you can get much better deals. You can get much better terms. When you're working with government and regulators, like everyone expects, governments and regulators to kind of be even-handed and really, have a fixed, this is what we're doing, X, Y, Z, but they're not, they're people. And you can get regulators excited to work with you. You can get government individuals excited to work with you. You can get elected officials really excited to work with you. And then, of course, getting hired in the first place. If you're trying to join a team, you're going to be pitching. But as we talked about earlier, pitching gets a bad rep. People are very nervous about pitching. They see it as an extension of public speaking, where they have to be really salesy, and it's all on them to convince a group of skeptical people to give them money or give them business. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time from Jerry Seinfeld, which is, the average American's greatest fear is public speaking. Number 2 is death. So when you're at a funeral, most people in the audience would rather be in the coffin than the one giving the eulogy. And I think this is really, really interesting because I think it's accurate. I also think it's good to identify this so that that anyone that's up there talking is feeling the same way that you feel. And it's really only through practice. It's only through practice that you can get yourself really comfortable, that you can get a really clean pitch, that you can get something that you can pull out in almost any situation, and have it be second nature. And so when you're talking about practice and when you're talking about reps, right? A lot of people say, well, I'm not going to have a lot of experience. I'm going to have to go and do it the first time cold. Yes, in a way, but everyone, on this call and most people have had multiple opportunities where they've had to pitch themselves and probably pitch themselves successfully. A lot of colleges have college interviews. There are job interviews. If you run for a leadership position, whether it be in a student organization, whether it be in a nonprofit, running for leadership is a pitch. Heck, even if you just have to convince a group of friends to, go to a movie that you want to go to and they don't, you've had some experience pitching yourself. And I think the best parallel to a pitch that you would give for your company is actually a job interview. It's very similar. The only thing that's different is the subject of the pitch. For a job interview, the subject of the pitch is you. So what makes a good job interview? And this is maybe a whole nother topic of conversation, but a good job interview is based around the passion that you display towards yourself and towards the opportunity in front of you. So you never should miss an opportunity to be passionate about what you're doing. The more excited you are, the more excited people are going to be listening to you, right? Number two is that it's a conversation. Too many people speak at an audience in an interview versus if you can really engage in a conversation and that a person on the other side of the conversation feels like they're actually talking with you as opposed to being talked at, you're going to get them engaged. They're going to remember you. They're going to have more positive feelings towards you. In short, concise, easy to understand points. Being a thesaurus does not help you. Saying things in the most complicated fashion or having to get every little detail in a job interview doesn't hit home. It's those kind of quick, easy to understand points, the things that are going to stick with your audience. And the best way to get those across is to practice, right? Yeah, anyone that would recommend any job fair or job organization, whether it be at a school or post-grad, will tell you to practice, because the more certain components are going to come up in a job interview. Your about you is going to come up. The walk me through your resume is going to come up. So you practice those. You practice them until they're really second nature. And it's the same thing with a pitch. And then obviously understanding the job you're interviewing for, right? You wouldn't go and sell yourself as being a great communicator if the job you're interviewing for is maybe software engineering, or you wouldn't talk about your presentation skills if you're going to be in a role where you're not doing presentations. So it's really understanding what the key components of the job that you're interviewing for. And like I said, a pitch is absolutely no different. You should be able to summarize what you do in 30 seconds. And this is what a lot of people refer to as the elevator pitch, although a full elevator pitch, you can get up to 60 seconds on it. But you want to be able to give a really concise perspective of what your company is doing. It doesn't have to get every single component of what differentiates you. It doesn't have to include every single detail about what your product looks like. Think about this like the chorus to a catchy song. You want it to be able to stick in people's heads, and you want it to be sufficiently different so it doesn't sound like every other song that they hear. But it's short, it's sweet, and it summarizes what you do without losing the attention of the person on the other side. Your passion, we talked about this before. Your passion for the product should be clearly felt by the people on the other side. And don't be afraid of being excited. You should be excited, right? You should want to talk about what your product and what your organization does all the time. And that excitement translates really well into what's going on the other side of the table, right? Like they really understand it. Here, hold on a half second. Snoop wanted to join in the conversation.
I enjoyed that. That was good. A little, he was pitching.
He's pitching to be let outside and chase whoever's in our front yard. That's his pitch. Unfortunately, don't think he's going to win this one. Engage. We talked about this. Have a conversation. Even if it's a one-sided pitch, whether you have to be giving it to a fixed audience, you want to be trying to get eye contact with the people on the other side. If you can, you want to pull them into the conversation. You want to get their feedback. You want to get their thoughts, because that allows you to do some improvisation while you're up there, and allows you to tailor the conversation more towards what their interests are. And that's always going to have a better output. Know your resume, right? So know the components that you want to pitch about your company, and you just got to practice them. My first startup. The CEO of the company was very experienced and an incredibly good seller. And what he told me to do was he told me to go home, work on a pitch, and then pitch it in the mirror to myself and do it over and over and over again. And he said you probably want to do 2 to 3 hours a night of pitching to yourself, because you are going to be the most harsh critic of yourself. And especially if you're forcing yourself to look at yourself, you're doing this in the mirror and you're pitching, you're going to see the mannerisms you like and you don't like. You're going to see the hesitations. You're going to see the points of your pitch that when you wrote them down sounded really good to you, but when you say them out loud, don't ring authentic, don't get across the point that you want to get across. And that's good. And you're not going to feel comfortable doing this, and it's going to feel weird, but just push through it. Just keep on practicing in the mirror and keep on practicing these pitches in the mirror. You will get better. And by the time you go out to pitch this externally, you're going to have much more comfort. And it's going to come as second nature. You don't want it to sound memorized. And if you really deeply know your pitch and it's really deeply embedded in you, it won't sound memorized. You'll be able to add and subtract things from it. You'll be able to improvise a little bit more, but because it's just so deeply ingrained in you, it's going to ring better. And then, as I mentioned, for the job interview, know your audience. You want to have a different pitch for VC than for a customer. You want to have a different pitch when you're at a job fair. You want to be able to take your core pitch and adjust it for what the people you're speaking to care about. So I'll stop there for a second and just kind of give the opportunity for anyone that's on the call. Obviously, I know that not all of you can join in from where you are dialing in from, but does anyone have any questions so far? Any areas where they feel like they'd want to hear a little bit more? The next section is going to be on how to start building that pitch and what are the key components of the pitch. But we're just setting the foundation there. So does anyone have any questions that can be helpful before I dive in there?
Anyone? Eduardo, Donna, Luisa. I know some people are on mute. And for those who are on LinkedIn Live, if you have any questions, please put them in the comment section and we can relay them to Zach. Nothing at the moment from our crew.
How many times did you do this in the mirror last night, Zach?
So I've gotten to the point where, luckily, I would say fortunately, I'm much more comfortable doing this than I was at one point. But I was not a good or an enthusiastic public speaker. Definitely not in college. I would never have thought of, a job interview being considered as a pitch or anything along those lines. It was really, frankly, being on the other side, listening to pitches and interviewing people for jobs, that it made me realize that following these kind of like simple steps of like letting the passion shine through, like eye contact, really practicing what you were doing and taking at least 15 minutes to a half hour before any time that you're pitching, whether it be yourself or your company, to understand what the person on the side of the table frankly wants to hear, or where their questions are going to come from. Most people don't do that on either side, whether it be pitching or in a job interview. And just taking those simple steps really sets you apart, and should give you a lot of confidence, which is just a virtuous cycle. You're just gonna be better at it because you feel better going into it, and then you'll make that preparation. You'll feel prepared and you'll feel comfortable, knowing and getting better at tailoring the core presentation to your audience.
Zach, I see we have a couple in the chat here. Let me, and Rebecca Manning, I know you put yours in. I don't know if you're able to unmute and ask it, or I can ask it for you if you're not able to. A lot of times people are joining us at work. Oh, hey, Rebecca, are you able to ask it directly to Zach, your question?
Sure, yeah. Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm in public health. My question is, 30 seconds is kind of short for a pitch, but it's the standard. So I'm wondering, how do you include everything you want to in a concise manner?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of go back to the metaphor because it's the best one I could come up with, which is like, it's the chorus of the song. It's just what you want to really resonate in their head. You want it to be sufficient enough to give a, you know, whether it be that 80-20 rule, like an 80 or probably not even 80% overview of what you're doing. But your real goal is to have that lead into a deeper conversation, have that lead into more questions where it's like, it's interesting that you do that. Is this the problem you're solving? Or is this specifically how you're solving the problem? Your summary, your pitch, your 20-second, your 30-second pitch, your elevator pitch is not meant to get to any sort of outcome except for to continue the conversation. It's like when you send in your resume to a job, potential job, that resume doesn't get you the job, it gets you the interview. And knowing that that part of the conversation is only to lead to the next part of the conversation also takes some of the pressure off of having to fit in all those details. 30 seconds is actually a really long time. And, you know, if it's front loaded too. If someone's bored during the first 15 to 20 seconds and they start blanking out, you're not even going to get the last 10 to 15 seconds, right? So you really need to just get that hook, get the chorus in, and people from that will engage or they won't engage. And if they're not engaging, then that gives you the opportunity to think, okay, so did I see when they tuned out? Did I see when they kind of stopped paying attention? Did I see what part didn't resonate with them, and adjust so that the next time you have an opportunity for a 30-second pitch, you have adjusted to the point where you're seeing what's hitting home. And obviously, you know, I should have said this, but part of the practice is before you give that first pitch, finding mentors that you can give a pitch to, doing it to your friends, doing it to your family. Friends and family will either always be a little bit nice to you, or depending on who your friends are and who your family are, will always try to pick holes even where there's not. Sometimes it's good to have that third party look at it from an entrepreneurship perspective and practice it, and they'll come back to you and they'll poke some holes in it. But yeah, 30 seconds is pretty good. And, you know, short and sweet is really underrated because you don't want to give the other side the opportunity to start thinking about something else. You want for them to identify if they're interested early.
That's great. Thanks, Rebecca. Donna Luisa, did you want to join in to ask your question to Zach?
Yes. Hi, folks. Okay. That I have practiced over the years, and I'm pretty good at this one, and it seems to work quite fine. I record myself while making my pitch in the mirror. And what I've found is that when I play it back, I tend to cringe because the words, if I look at myself, the words sound differently to what I'm thinking is being put out there. And it's important because I've learned to slow down, redo the words, and 30 seconds is too long. So that I try to get it right in 15 seconds, and maybe I'll go over to 20 seconds. But if I get to 30 seconds, then that is a hard practice because I will lose myself and I will lose the other person. There's this thing that happens to us, and this is something I've proven to myself over the years. When you go beyond 15 seconds speaking, and you are aware that you're really making a pitch, your confidence can dip. It doesn't matter how strongly you feel about something. That pitch is supposed to get the attention and get a response. So your second elevator pitch is where the meat comes in. So that when you record yourself and you play back, and this is so good because we are all doing these selfies, when you play that back, you see what the other person is seeing, and you know, hey, this just won't cut it. So this is what I'd add to it. This is what I'd put out there. What do you think about that?
100%. And, I totally agree. And once again, you're trying to get that first part of the pitch is trying to get to that second part of the pitch, which hopefully, frankly, the person you're talking to is going to drive. They're going to ask you the questions that matter most to them. And the other good point of that is if you're talking and your pitch is 45 seconds, don't speak faster to get to the 30 seconds. It's really challenging to follow someone who's accelerating what they're talking about, and you'll miss the key points. The reason why 30 seconds and shorter, I totally agree. 15 seconds is ideal. The reason why that is better than 30 seconds is because there's fewer points in it that the other side needs to digest. Just going faster and having the same number of points isn't helpful, and you will speed up. Especially if you're a nervous pitcher. Always assume you will speed up your talking when you are giving that to other people because you're nervous. You kind of subconsciously want to get through it as fast as possible. And you got to resist that temptation. You really want to hit home the points that you want to hit home. There's a reason why those are the points making the cut.
Thanks, Donna Luisa, for the question. One quick follow-up I have, Zach, just sort of being, well, not only just this COVID time where we're all online and it's hard and attention spans are lower, but even just sort of in general with social media and so many distractions out there. Do you feel, because I feel like even in the classroom with students, like, and I think Rebecca asked this interesting question of like this amount of time, like I feel like as a society, the attention span is narrowing and narrowing and narrowing. And I think that's true if you're an investor, you have a narrow attention span. As a customer, I mean, all the different things that you laid out, even as an employer, I feel like that there's this increased pressure because of all the distractions we have with our various devices and kind of honing in. Do you feel like do you kind of agree with that things are continuing to evolve because of distractions out there that sort of necessitate coming up with a great 30-second pitch?
Yeah, I think there's two components into it. One is definitely that everyone's carrying around one of these, and you'll very rarely get a conversation without someone having it on the table, frankly, with the screen facing up. Don't do this if you're the one pitching. It does signal a lack of commitment to where you are. And nothing will get someone to commit less to the conversation, to the pitch that you're giving them, than showing them that you're not committing to them by putting this away in your pocket. Don't pull it out, don't look at it, etc. The second component of it, and this is but equally important, is that there's a lot more competition for your attention, not just from other devices, but from, frankly, other competitors. There's more people trying to do entrepreneurial things, and because everyone has access to the internet and can Google all the competition that you have, and because of the proliferation of whether it be cold calling, cold emailing, targeted advertisements, there's a lot more out there of people trying to pitch towards similar problems or the same problems, or even if not the same problems and not even at all related, people are just getting pitched more. They're just getting presented to more. So it's really important to have it be crisp, to have it be short, to have it be tailored. And if people are interested, let them pull the details out of you.
Great. Thanks, Zach.
Of course. I'll keep going, but I'm sure Michael or the team will flag to me if any other comments come in. So if there's anything I'm saying that either rings untrue to you or you want more clarity on, just put the comments in and I'll respond. So where to start, and we kind of already hit this a bit. There's really two foundational components, and there's two things that if you're deciding that you're going to do this, you're going to start your own company, or you have been building a product and you want to get it out there. There are two key components that once you have down, you can frankly adapt them, and you will have to adapt them. You'll have to iterate on them. But once you have them in a place where you're pretty confident, you can alter to almost any situation. And that's the elevator pitch, and that's that 30-second or less, and then a foundational pitch deck. Elevator pitch is more important, I would say, or it just comes earlier in the life cycle. And then foundational pitch deck is kind of when you start wanting to do things that are a little bit more official, when you start wanting to get contracts, when you start wanting to talk about angel investing or VCs. So I would start with the elevator pitch. And I find that the way to make it less salesy, which both has two benefits: one, it makes you feel more confident giving it, and two, it makes the person on the other side feel like they're listening to a person versus being sold, is turning that pitch into like a business journey or narrative. So, it starts with, how you or your team discovered the problem. I have how many times I practice? I have these pitches in from my last two companies that, I helped get off the ground. And today I still can remember, right? I still can remember the core components of it. So the first one was a connected medical device that helped, or that helps, I should say, because they're doing quite well during COVID, that helps people identify how to respond to symptoms, and it helps governments and public health organizations identify where febrile leading infections are spreading. But the way we sold it was a narrative, right? The narrative was our founder worked for the Clinton Health Foundation, and he was incredibly distraught when he saw that we knew more about our social media presence than we knew about where infectious disease were spreading, right? That's the identifying of the problem. He identified that there was a problem, that we couldn't track the spread of infectious disease. And then, how do you develop your solution? He realized that the first device that anyone reached to when they had an infectious disease was the thermometer. Okay, so now you have an orientation for the solution. But these thermometers only gave them a readout of a number. It only gave the person using it a number, and it was up to them to figure out how to use that number to educate their next steps. We thought, what if we made a better thermometer? A thermometer that connected to your phone, that crowdsourced a response based on your symptoms and your profile, said, okay, you have a 1-year-old child that has a fever, give them children's thermometer, children's Tylenol, but not children's Advil. Or if the fever goes over 101 for a certain number of days, call your local pediatrician. We went out there, we talked to parent groups, and we talked to the leading health experts, and they all said this was an incredible idea, yada, yada, right? It's a narrative, it's a journey. It starts with how you discover the problem, why you're passionate about the problem, how that passion led you to seeing what this solution was. Okay, now that you now you have the solution, how did it lead you to developing the product that you have today? And then all the various people, whether it be customers or whether it be experts, who say this is the right way to do it. It's a narrative. So you're now, instead of pitching to the person on the other side, you're telling the story of how you got to where you are today. And people will listen to a story. People will follow a story. People will understand the story, and they get pulled into it. So it's a really easy way to make a nervous first-time pitcher's presentation feel more natural to them. And it also has the added benefit of pulling in your audience and getting your audience really connected with it. Does that make sense to anyone? Anyone have any thoughts or questions on that? It was very counterintuitive to me, but I kept on hearing the similar approaches coming from the pitches I was watching, and I kept on seeing my CEO at the time and people who were my mentors, who I really respected, taking this approach. It took me a while to realize why they were doing it. And part of it is just human psychology. Humans follow stories better than they follow facts. And so if you turn your business into a story and into a narrative, you really suck people in. Here's an example that I really liked online. The Warby Parker's founders, obviously did an amazing job with their business. And their story was that they just got so frustrated paying $500 more for eyeglasses. And they knew the market was dominated by a small number of companies. So they thought, hey, we're going to develop eyeglasses that are at a democratic price point, but that provide value to the many of users. And they also wove in a social good message. But it's, once again, they're hitting the narrative. They identified the problem. They saw where the solution could be and what their solution was. So I'll pause there on the elevator pitch. Anyone have any questions on starting the elevator pitch? I didn't get really into the weeds on it, and we can talk more at the end of this presentation if that would be helpful to talk about how to do it. But obviously, a component of that is everyone's story is very unique to them. But still, does anyone have any questions or any comments on what we were just talking about?
Hey Zach, you mentioned the psychological factor in pitching yourself or your product, and a couple of months ago I was reading this book called Pitch Anything, right? And I realized that this whole thing of pitching is it's like a power dynamic, like some people have more power than others, like the people you're asking money, like they have more power than you in some occasions, right? But my question is like, how does pitching play a role in increasing the entrepreneur's perceived and actual power, right? Because I think that can increase your odds in like having a louder voice, or more influence in the person you're trying to convince. Does that question make sense? Because I know.
Yeah, I think so. Let me try to take another frame it slightly different, and you can tell me if I missed or not. There's a big component to pitching, which is credibility building, meaning that at the beginning, when you're trying to bring up your subject to someone else, whether they have context why they're talking to them or not, there's inherent skepticism on their side. Because ultimately you want something from them, right? You're not up there doing this for fun unless you're just practicing. You want something from them, meaning that you have to convince them that giving you what you want is in their best interest. And so that definitely has a power dynamic, a power imbalance structure in there. A pitch is definitely about leveling that playing field, because you want them to understand that doing for you is in their best interest. So that's definitely going to be a component of it. But I think even before you get there, you want there to be a bit of credibility building, that you're someone not just that can be trusted, but you're someone that knows what they're talking about. There's a rational reason for you to be there in front of them. And there's a couple components when we get into building the foundational pitch deck. You'll see this. Obviously, your goal is that they're not doing you a favor. You're both there for a reason. You're both benefiting from this interaction. That's obvious. That's your ultimate goal. But there's some steps to get there. So I understand. I think I understand where you're coming from, and there's a couple steps that eventually lead you there. Is that kind of what you were getting at?
Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's a good segue. So the foundational pitch deck, and this is like a PowerPoint presentation, or I don't know if people still use PowerPoint as their primary source, or I'm using Google Slides here, and I'm sure there's all sorts of different solutions here. But it's some form of slides or pages that you can use as a visual aid. And once again, the elevator pitch is for when you're having a human to human interaction where you can't bring in a presentation. So maybe it's actually in an elevator, or maybe you're networking in some way, shape, or form. Or maybe when we're allowed out, you're just out at a bar and you're telling someone about your idea. But when you get to the next stage where you're actually, okay, I know I'm going to go meet this person. I've set up a call with a potential customer. I've set up a presentation to someone that, potentially could fund my business idea. This is just a illustrative pitch deck. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to skin these cats. And obviously, depending on what your pitch is and what stage you are as a company, certain things will be more relevant than others. But overall, I think this is a good place to start. And most of these items you should keep to 1, maybe 2 max pages of very simple, clear, concise points. The more text, the harder it is for someone to follow. But a lot of people, I would say a strong start is mission. What is your company doing? And this is the slide where you can overlay that really quick 15-second what your company does. Some people start with problem. Some people start with mission. You're getting to the same thing. You're giving someone some background where you're quickly introducing them to what your solution, what your product is geared towards. And then you pull them into, okay, the actual solution and the actual product. So you go from, okay, here's what we've identified. And if you're keeping this interactive, you say, hey, how have you experienced this problem? Do you want them to come back to you with, yeah, I also understand that as a problem. Here's my experience with that problem. And then you go, great. Here is how we're building the solution. Here is our approach to solving what you just identified as also one of your problems. And once again, this is, especially early on, these are pretty simple, not a lot of details. You might not even have a product when you start. So it might just be a general overview as to what kind of type of product you're going to build. Then you want to get into, especially if this is a VC, you want to get into market sizing. You want them to understand that you've done your background, because if they're going to invest in you, or for a customer, if they're going to purchase you, there's got to be a return there. So there's got to be a big enough problem, usually from a monetary perspective, right? From a dollar perspective. Although, there's not-for-profit startups as well out there, and those are doing incredible things. A little bit of a different pitch, but maybe there you'd go for public good. But typically you want to show that there's a big dollar, there's a big addressable market. And then you want to start to talk about validation. So either how you've confirmed that addressable market is there, how you've confirmed that your approach is the right approach. You want to show that there is competition. A lot of people want to be like, we're the only people doing this. That's not a good thing, right? Usually if you're the only person doing something, there might be a reason for that. The problem might not be big enough. There might not really be a problem. But if there are a bunch of people trying to do it, and you can say, we're doing it differently, and we're doing it in a way that's more successful than they're doing it, that can actually be more reaffirming for your idea than if you're the first person to the table. And then the last part is team interaction, right? Like, these are the smart people we have around the table. This is why you should believe in what we're doing. If you're later stage in your company, here are the customers we've already brought in. Here's how they're using our product that shows that our product has hit the mark. And there's all sorts of different metrics and different things you should show from that side. And we can get into that in a bit. But just some quick examples. And Eduardo, you kind of hit on the very first example I'm going to show. It's the second example. The first example is mission statement. Once again, just showing how simple these things can be and how they hit on kind of some of the key components that these companies are trying to get across, right? Google, our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Really simple, really to the point, covers what Google does, right? You read that and you go, yeah, that's Google. Same with Rory Parker. Create vintage, inspired, boutique quality eyewear at a revolutionary price point. Doesn't get into the details, doesn't get into all their competitive advantages, just hits the high level. Once again, that chorus, that refrain in their song. Problem. Here's the Airbnb one. This is one I know you've seen Eduardo, but it's identifying why there needs to be a company that's solving this problem. Why there's a solution, right? I like these ones because once again, they're really simple, and it's kind of hard to argue that there's a problem in these areas. And I think that makes it resonate. Like, if the person across the table from you can argue that, no, there really isn't a problem there, then you're going to lose someone on the problem side. Because why do you need a solution if there's no problem? I think these are a couple examples of really simple laying out of the reason for these companies to exist, right? Price, disconnection from the city's culture, ease of use in terms of booking hotels. And for Mixpanel, which is an analytics platform, right, most of the problem will make decisions by using their gut, which means that they'll be lucky or wrong. Little less revolutionary now, but when Mixpanel was coming out with the whole dashboard and tracking mechanism for companies to do their data, that the obsession and the conviction that every company should be tracking most of what they're doing was less ingrained than it is today. And then really leading right into that solution, right? Airbnb has 3 buckets here that pretty much directly tie to where they identified a problem. And similarly for Mixpanel, right? Like, boom, our solution covers this. And Mixpanel even says, hey, it covers this. We're going to cover this. We don't do it yet, but we're going to do it. And that's fine, right? It's what we can currently do and where we're going. And you can lay out your solution as where we're going, especially if the people that you're talking to understand that you're early in your process of starting this company. If you're if they know you don't have a product yet, don't say you have a product that does all these things. Lay out the solution and lay it out in a way that's simple, and you can even have a little bit of a roadmap, not a big in-depth one, but a little bit of roadmap of how you're going to solve it. And product overview is when you dive in a little bit further into that solution. Very simple, like here's the pieces of functionality that we're gonna build or that we have built. This is really what you do. It doesn't need to be an interactive app. And to Donna Luisa's point, right? This is also just getting you to that next stage, right? You're not doing a demo here, especially in your foundational pitch deck. You're not walking them through a demo. You want them to be so excited that they ask you to do a demo or ask you for more details. They're not expecting it to be completely laid out here. And if you're trying to lay it all out for them in minute detail, but they're not sold overall on it, it being a problem or you having the capability in the team to solve it, they're not going to care about that detail, and that detail is just going to bog them down. So that's why I really like these pages. I really like the simplicity of them. Market size and validation. These also don't have to be a McKinsey project, right? You don't need to have done a million citations of different scholarly articles. I really like how simple these are, right? Like Airbnb here is not avoiding the fact that they have competition. They're not saying they're the first people to think of their problem. They're pointing towards two other websites that are trying to do the problem and saying, look how much traction they have, because they're setting up for a later side that says, here's why we're better than them. But they're starting with, this is already a problem that companies have shown people want a solution to. And that's hugely valuable, right? You want the same with LinkedIn, right? They're showing, look at all these other companies that are kind of in the same area, how much money they're making, how many users they're getting. These guys are validating that this market is there and that it's a large market. So I actually think, and I think that having good competition and using that competition as part of your market size and validation is impactful, and it can be more impactful than saying there is none, especially if you're talking to an educated audience who knows that there is competition out there. They want to hear why you're different from your competition. And so here's another slide to that, right? There's a lot of different ways to do differentiation. The XY axis of, here's the functionality of what we do, and here's the functionality of what our competitors do. That's usually a little bit better for a later stage organization or a later stage conversation. Here, I'd once again still keep it high level, right? Like Uber from their original one. Cabs don't guarantee pickups. They can take 40 minutes. They aren't as safe and clean as black cars, because when Uber started, they were black cars. Price, right? They're really simple. They resonate. They don't dive all the way into the minutia. They just are trying to hit home that there are things we do that our competition or that the next best alternative doesn't do. Business model. This obviously depends if you're speaking to a VC. I'm torn. Sometimes you include this, sometimes you don't. If you're a direct consumer company that is selling something immediately, like a physical good or something like that, you don't really need this as much. Although you could show here that you project there to be a margin on what you sell. If you're later stage, it's much more important to show the margin, to show where the investment's going, to show that there's a return on the investment. If you're talking to a customer, this is really the pricing conversation. I probably wouldn't include that in your core product. You want them to ask you if you are going to include it towards the end, and include it with, if you can, with a return analysis, because anyone that you're trying to convince to buy your service is going to have to advocate on your behalf to their financial department that the dollars that would be spent on your product and service are worth it. So you really need to empower them to make that argument for you. So it's an important page. I wouldn't say it's part of it doesn't need to be part of your foundational pitch deck, but it's probably iteration 1 or 2. Same with go-to-market. If you'll get a good picture for this after your first couple of pitches, if this is once again mostly oriented towards a VC or towards an angel investor, if a lot of the questions and a lot of the doubt comes from, yeah, it's an interesting product, an interesting solution, but how do you get customers for it? Then then a go-to-market page is valuable. If that's not the question, or if it's like you're selling a physical good, or if it's something that clearly has a certain path to market, you might not need this, but it's another page to think about. And it can be very simple here. Or it can be more advanced, like the Mint ones on the side. I like the Mint one just because they had clearly thought of the life cycle of a customer. But those are, like the last one, those are a little bit more advanced. So they don't necessarily have to be part of your foundational pitch deck. The one I don't have in here, which I think should be part of one of your early pitch decks, this is the last slide I have in here, is a team page. I think it's very helpful when you get to iteration 1, 2, or when you're talking to VCs or angel investors, to have some credibility building. Especially if you have a team that has some good credentials behind it. If you don't, having a good advisor, having a good advisory board, just shows that there's people around the table that have experience in the area that you're addressing. And that are willing to put their name on what you're doing, because someone's name and someone's reputation is one of the most important things to them. So I think those are very helpful components to include as well. And that can be used both for VCs, for customers, et cetera. When you're early on and you can't point to a logo page of here's all of the customers that use us, if you're doing like a B2B product, then it's helpful to point to, well, we have an expert that on, let's say your Mint, we have an expert on financial software. We have an expert on this. We have teams that were responsible for these great products that everyone loves. It's that type of credibility building that allows the person on the other side to say, oh, these people actually do have experience and know what they're doing, so I can trust them. That is the end of the presentation I have here. Any questions on what I've shown, anything that I didn't touch? I'll leave it open to the floor.
Great timing. We try to end these exactly an hour, and you made it just under the wire. So if there was one quick question that someone had, we could get that in for Zach. I guess I'll ask it if I have the floor, if no one wants to jump in. I mean, these slides that you pulled, are these these are from the pitch decks of these companies? Where'd you source? I mean, it's interesting that those things are out there. Where'd you find them?
Oh, gotta love Google. You can find some really good examples of early pitch decks online. People use it as like their calling cards, and people like to share, to show where they started. So you can find some good ones. And I do think that's another, if you're comparing yourself to one of these companies, right? Like I'm the Airbnb of X, people like doing that. Look and see if you can find their pitch decks online, see if you can find what they highlighted. You won't probably find them for non-public companies that have a lot of their financial data in there, but you might be able to find the early way that they approach their market and what was important to them. And there's a lot of them online, and there's a lot of them for companies you've never heard of. I focus on the ones that everyone's heard of because people know what they do, and so they can see, oh, that's how they sold themselves. But there's a ton in different spaces of niche companies that you can find.
I love Dropbox's application to Y Combinator is out there for people to look for it. I mean, it is fascinating to kind of see how folks, thought of their business early on and how much it stayed true kind of with the test of time. So this is great. Zach, thank you for doing this. This is awesome. This is a topic that I think we all struggle with. And I think there's some really practical suggestions in here for our students, for entrepreneurs that are on. And we so appreciate having you part of the Veale Entrepreneur Residence family, and appreciate, I know you'll be back with us. Is it next week? When's your return visit next week? to talk a little bit more about your own career journey and particularly in the healthcare space. So with that, let me thank you for joining. Thanks to everybody for being with us both here on Zoom and on LinkedIn Live. And we'll look forward to seeing you at our next event soon.